Welcome back to Jess Klein's Big Table. I heard someone say recently that podcasts are really about building community. And I really like that because part of my desire and intention with Jess Klein's Big Table was just to get to know some of these amazing folks who I have, met in passing at shows or at festivals and such. And I'm really loving getting to know the folks who have been coming on here. So I think you're going to love my guest today. Rachael Sage is a singer, songwriter, poet, and producer from New York who has released over 20 albums and EPs of empowered alt folk pop on her own label, MPress Records, since first bursting onto the women's music scene via Lilith Fair. An outspoken activist on behalf of many causes, including LGBTQ plus rights, homelessness, and women's health issues, Sage is a self-described cancer thriver who is a 6-time Independent Music Award winner and John Lennon Songwriting Contest Grand Prize recipient. Rachael has shared stages with an eclectic list of artists, including Ani DiFranco, Judy Collins, Dar Williams, Beth Hart, and Shawn Colvin. Her current album, Another Side, is out now. I loved talking to Rachael. She is a hoot. She's a character. I learned so much from her. We bonded, and I know you're going to enjoy this conversation. So check it out. Oh, wait, it's still counting down. Sorry. Okay, welcome to the Big Table, Rachael.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm really excited you could be here. I know you're about to go on a month-long tour of the UK.
Yes, that is correct. I actually just hit send on my newsletter like 30 seconds before I, reached out to you today. So
amazing.
Getting all the things done.
Yeah. Are you this is kind of a nonsense question, but are you like a light packer or a heavy packer?
I think you laughed out loud because you already knew the answer to that question. And if you're cracking yourself up, chances are the absurdity of the question is resounding.
Okay.
Come on, you know me a little bit.
I know.
Right?
There's some flowers and sparkles.
I pack lightly considering my nature because of course we're trying to avoid those, extra fees from an extra bag. So let's just put it this way. If I'm allowed to take a 50-pound suitcase, it's going to be like on the nose 50 pounds, and I will weigh it on my own personal scale before we get to the airport. And, if I have an extra pound, I'll put in an extra outfit.
Yeah.
I work it to the max.
Oh, wait, I can bring more.
Yes, another pair of sparkly shoes. The hair flowers, thankfully, don't weigh anything, nor does like my gossamer stage, aesthetic. So it's more just like the day wear,
Yeah. Yes. London daytime fashion.
For sure.
Etc.
It's my calling card. How am I going to make friends on the spot otherwise? If
I know.
It's not a conversation piece,
Yeah.
Time is short.
That's right. Oh, I love it so much. Okay, so let's.
Yes,
I actually
serious.
I know. Sorry, I'm trying to have a smooth segue, and it's not going to be that smooth. But
smooth segues are like so 90s. So
okay,
just go with it.
Okay, cool. I when I was sort of researching you and thinking about you and listening to your music, I thought back to the keynote address that I saw you give at the Surfa conference this spring. And so for people who aren't familiar with the sort of folk songwriter world, Surfa is the Southeast Regional Folk Alliance Conference. So it's a conference of folk musicians and people who are into that music and stuff. And Rachael was the keynote speaker. And your presentation really moved me. And if it's okay, I'd like to just read a short piece of it. Is that okay if I share it with folks?
Oh, my goodness. It's less pretentious than me quoting myself. So dive in.
Okay. You said, "It is undeniable that every person sitting in this room comes from a family lineage that has endured enormous struggle. It doesn't matter where you're from. I could ask for a show of hands of anyone who ever heard their parents or guardians describe some seemingly insurmountable trial their ancestors endured so that future generations could have freedom as they did not, and I bet everyone would raise their hand. Of course, when it is your story, your history, your people's struggles that continually propel you forward in the quest for something, redemption, resilience, rebirth, reconstitution, it seems like it must be more important than others. It is so real, so emotional, and so substantiated. It is almost impossible to imagine every human being is navigating as complex a narrative from the past into the present and hopefully into the future. But as a certain saying goes, every person is a universe. And in many ways, this has always been the premise with which I was raised that drew me to the storytelling nature of acoustic singer-songwriters and to the folk community as a whole. This is...
I know how to make a long sentence.
This statement is so powerful to me.
Oh,
and
thank you, Jess.
Yeah,
I got
guess
a little bit clamped listening just because it's, it's different to write it than to hear someone else speak it. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you heard the truth in your own words, perhaps.
There's a lyric.
Yeah. I guess I wanted to start by asking you, how did you come to this understanding that every person is a universe? Because that's such an insightful, compassionate, and like generative outlook. And yeah,
I guess that's kind of like asking from whence does empathy flow? And, there seem to be two schools of thought on this, that on the one hand, perhaps you're born with it, or to a large degree. On the other hand, we're all born sort of innocent and wide-eyed and nurture, and how you're raised and perhaps, education and values that are emphasized in the home or in school contribute to that. And I think for me, it was a healthy portion of both. I certainly, by nature, have always been the type of person, for better and sometimes for worse, who deeply feels everything. And to a large extent, other people's emotions. At least it has seemed that way to me from a young age. My mother would kind of point this out, and almost, sometimes there would be praise for it, like, oh, sweetheart, that's so compassionate and kind. I hope you stay that way, or in other circumstances, sweetheart, that's really not your problem. Don't get wrapped in up in all that craziness. And that would usually, that advice would stem from particular judgment, in terms of partners and whatnot. So, I think it's a complicated way to be, and it's a very simple way to be at the same time. Things seem very instantly right or wrong to me in kind of a moral way, but less that than just that, I have always felt like I could so easily be the other person that I'm talking to, that I'm reading about, that I'm seeing in a documentary. And, I think maybe some of it also came from Hebrew school and some of the teachers I had there who were continually emphasizing something I know you're familiar with called tzedakah, which is giving back and charity, and that could apply to anything. It could be helping plant a garden at your nursery school. It could be donating, $1 to this cause that we're talking about in the class. From a very young age, from like 5 years old. Yeah. That was sort of, harangue is too strong a word, but it was imparted to me how important and how meaningful that was. And somehow I understood why. Maybe some people didn't, but I was like, well, yeah, because that could be me. That may be me at some point, and we're just kind of getting each other through it. So
yeah.
It's just kind of always been
that's so beautiful.
Thank you. It's a little rambly, but
no, that's okay. It just really feels like the kind of, like that, the simplicity of it, and maybe understanding it, intuitively as a kid on some level, but somehow in our world, some people surely were taught that as kids,
that.
and then all this stuff gets put on top of it, and
I thought of something
Yeah.
else that probably, it's more than a small factor. It doesn't apply from maybe the get-go, but by the time I was in second, third, fourth grade, I definitely struggled with bullies and just being different, being a little weird, being, I don't know what the word would be, teacher's pet, all these things, caring too much, which was not cool, wanting to raise my hand, wanting to have the answer. And I guess in some ways that made me different because maybe the other kids were more concerned with, wearing the trendy outfit or ironically, or, being stronger or being better in sports, whatever it was. And so I think having to go through some of that, being picked on, sometimes quite seriously, later in life helped me empathize with other people going through things like that. So
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
of course.
Yeah. Would you talk a little bit about your cultural background and just sort of growing up? What was like
Sure.
Rachel Sage childlike life was like?
It's funny because, no matter how old I get, and I'm getting up there, my mom continues to unearth papers and memories and little drawings and little poems and things from school and to bring them to me every time she visits, which is not frequently enough. But she was here in Beacon not too long ago visiting with me. And, she arrives with a shopping bag of papers, and some of them are like just kooky little finger paints and drawings that I did from, like 6, 7, 8. And then later on, letters that I wrote to her and my dad from camp. And what became very apparent to me was, I definitely had a sense of humor from a young age, even though I look back and I think, wow, I was a really serious kid. I was so like earnest and hardworking and people pleasing. But there are a lot of sort of zingers, like
Amazing.
like, dear mom and dad, like, I love you, but I don't miss you at all. Ha ha. Like having a great time at camp. They're making me write this letter to you. I know you don't really mind. You'd rather me be having fun. All right. I think that's enough to like fulfill the requirement. XO, like that kind of thing. And I'm sure that I must have understood that would make them laugh and think, wow, our kid is like a character. I remember being aware of like how to be a ham and get a reaction from them that I was funny or that I was silly. And some of that, of course, is like to distract from maybe other things you might be doing wrong or a grade that isn't as good or whatever. Like if I could bring a little entertainment value as a child to the dinner table, things seem to just go better. So yeah, I don't know.
Definitely a good
helps
tool to have.
your question, but so there was that. I was definitely like the entertainer from a young age, and certainly I tried really hard at everything. My mom was pretty strict, but it was sort of a logical strict. It was like I knew I should get good grades and I knew I should do well, but she made a very good sort of like legalese case for why. Like, well, honey, if you want to do all these things I know you want to do, you want to, be a pop star and you want to, win an Oscar and you want to do it. And I'm like, 9.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, so-and-so like went to Harvard and Jodie Foster did this and that and Meryl Streep went to Yale. Like she would sort of like frame it like all the people you want to be like and all of the artists you admire have gone through a certain structure to become as great as they are. And there wasn't much advocacy for like figuring it out in an outsidery way at all in my family.
Interesting.
And I think and from my dad either. And I think even though he was like more relaxed and probably would have just been happy whatever I did, but it was her voice that kind of penetrated in those moments. And I think some of that definitely has to do with being, immigrants and wanting each generation to kind of do better, and that they work so hard and they want their kids to get the best education, like all these things that didn't necessarily correlate to an understanding of being an artist for a lifetime and what that might entail, what different skills I might want to brush up on.
Yeah. So were your folks immigrants or their parents?
Their parents.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And quickly assimilated, of course. And I even learned recently that my grandmother on my mother's side, this is very specific and personal, but that she lied about her age, or they lied about her age, because she had her whole life, because it was like such a scandal to be even like a year or two older than her husband. Like, because, they lived in the South. She was from Atlanta.
Wow. Okay.
So the things that you had to be just so, and like not ruffle any feathers, and just behave and follow the rules, and, not cast any sort of like, I don't know what the word would be, but just not make waves.
Yeah.
That was very big in my mom's upbringing and in how she raised us. And my dad was sort of the opposite. Like, he kind of raised himself. His parents were a little, loosey-goosey, absentee. And I think that worked for him in a lot of ways. He just figured things out on his own. But total polar opposites. Yeah. And I was definitely like, in the middle. I had this free spirit, artsy side, but I also knew the rules and wanted to please everyone. So
your mom's folks were they? I'm sorry, I think we talked about this before, but were they?
Everybody came
Russian
to Ellis
Jews?
Island, but then they went to Atlanta.
They went to Atlanta. Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
Russian, and moved around in the Pale of Settlement. Some Poland, some other places, Ukraine, I think.
Yeah.
And same with my dad. Yeah, very similar locations.
Yeah. Okay. I don't think I knew. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to ask you as well. Like, what's your
heritage in that way? Yeah. So
I'm taking over your podcast.
No, please do it. Do it. Both of my grandmothers came over from Minsk. One of my grandfathers, I don't really know. We don't know. He also had kind of like a freer wheeling vibe, but he didn't talk that. He was just kind of like, my maternal grandfather would only, in my experience, he only talked if he had a joke to tell. So it was adorable to me.
Makes him a winner in my book.
I know. He just would sit there until something funny came up. And then my paternal grandfather, his folks came from Austria. I don't even know if it was called Austria then. This would have been late 1800s.
So very similar.
Yeah, really similar. Yeah.
We could be related for all we know.
We could. Seriously. We really could. Yeah.
There's a little town called Colomea that's on one of my family trees, and I know some of my family was from there, but I don't know a whole lot about it other than that they left in a hurry, as the saying goes. So,
yeah.
Thank goodness.
I wanted to ask you this question. You also said, I really studied up on this Surfa keynote because it really touched me. You mentioned you were talking about summer camp, and you were talking about in your keynote address feeling like an outsider. And I guess I'm wondering, like, I've always felt a little bit like an outsider, and to me that was like partly being an artist, and partly to me it also like had to do with being Jewish and like aware of not being part of like mainstream America or whatever. And I guess
I understand that.
Yeah, to me those things go together. Do you feel like the outsider thing is also part of being Jewish, or does that not feel like your experience?
That's a really good question. I mean, I know intellectually that it should be, but and especially because I did grow up somewhere where I was extremely in the minority. I mean, I think there were maybe 2-3 Jewish people in my class, sometimes at my school. So, but my mom, to her great credit, she actually came to my school at an early age and did like an assembly about Hanukkah. She did one, and I think she did another one maybe about Passover. She did the food-based things.
Yeah.
And this is, again, I was really very badly bullied. I think it was second grade it started. But oddly enough, I wasn't more picked on when she came to do those things. I was actually like cool for the day because she was bringing Hanukkah gelt. She was bringing chocolate. You know, she was bringing special cookies and, you know, food and things that were interesting. And they were like, can you get your mom to give me another one? You know, it was like, I was like,
do you have an in with your mom?
Right. You know, like, I only got one. Can I get three? You know, like, Bill got 7, you know, and my mom would be like, sure, kids, you know, like anything to like help my daughter be like hip today, you know?
Yeah.
So in an odd way, I think her taking more of a strong stance about who we were and trying to actually share some interesting knowledge and fun about the culture, you know, helped in those moments. Yeah. Later on, when it was like, you know, became obvious to me that all my friends who belonged to such and such social club or their parents went to this place or that place, that my mom explained to me, you know, certain people were not welcome at, or that was such a long-standing tradition that even if it wasn't official anymore, that's how it shook out. It was pretty shocking to me, you know, because I was like in denial. I didn't want to think about that. But yeah, so I was aware of it, but I never really thought that was why I was picked on. And it's still hard to parse, you know. It probably didn't help that I wasn't like inviting all the cool kids to some fun, you know, racy holiday party where my parents were away skiing and we were all getting drunk in the basement or whatever. Like, it just wasn't going to happen. My parents were like too on me to ever leave long enough for me to throw that wild party. So, yeah, it's unfortunate, but yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Like, I remember growing up, I grew up in Rochester, New York, and actually in the suburb I lived in, I don't think it was majority Jewish, but it was like very established Jewish community. Okay. But there was like there was a country club, which I can't remember the name of, but they had a dance for preteens every year, and it was called the Chatterbox, you know, something. And it was like, was
it like debutante-ish?
Yeah. And it was like, I remember, I think maybe I was like the first class of kids where they were actually inviting Jewish kids. And I just remember feeling like, this is so weird. Like, I had the same, I don't know, for me, I was like,
and
this
your parents
is so
like explained that to you, or you just knew?
I think my mom was like, this is fucking ridiculous.
Right.
You know, my
like,
mom.
No one's going to talk about this, but this is what's going on.
Yeah, she was just very practical and was like, this is such bullshit. But I just remember being like, this is so dumb. Like, what's the point of excluding? Like, I remember thinking this was dumb and funny, not like this is scary and dangerous. And maybe that was a safer way to look at it. But
right. I just had an interesting thought about that and childhood, and sort of a turning point for me. I went to 2 schools that were not so great. One was just specifically flagrantly irresponsible, where parents and teachers just had no idea what mean kids were doing and weren't involved and weren't, you know, holding any kids accountable. A nightmare. Like the movie Mean Girls, you know, the first one. So, and then after a certain point, when I couldn't take it anymore and just was like crying every day and wouldn't get on the bus, you know, we made a plan. It was like an extraction plan. It was like, next year, when the school year resets, you can go to this place. And it was a different school. And I didn't know much about it, but I knew change could only be good. And it went from being all girls to co-ed. And looking back, it's really interesting to me because obviously, you know, I'm a girl's girl. I'm a feminista. I love women's music, women's everything. And that's been a huge part of my life and career and all of it. But there was something about the mean girls and how they just compounded their meanness culturally. And then when I switched to the other school, and it was more of kind of a reflection of like adolescent nature and society. And, you know, the popular girls were interested in the popular guys, and the nerdy kids like could just hang out with each other. And it actually was quite nice. And I had great friends right away. And the people who ran the school had much better mindful like values and were just on top of it. So I had a wonderful experience there. And then later on went back to like a not so great high school. So I had the juxtaposition, and, you know, it just stands out to me that at that good school, they really made a point to emphasize cultural diversity and to have everyone share their own stories, and everyone like do public speaking about something they were invested in, and it really encouraged like great listeners, you know. So
amazing.
Very grateful for that.
Yeah. So beautiful. Oh, man, school and education are very important. Yep. Okay. Okay. Can you talk a little bit about, there's just like so much in your experience that I'm so fascinated by, but like, I think it's amazing that you, like, it seems that your aesthetic and your creativity just like is infused into like everything. And I'm really fascinated by that. But
Thank you. But I always say I'm good at what I'm good at, but the rest of it, oy to the bay.
Yeah.
Can't cook, can't drive. You know, there's a lot of things I suck at. So I'm really good at being creative.
Yeah, well, lots of people can cook and drive. That's okay. Can you talk a little bit about your time as a ballerina? I don't know. Do you still do some dance? But you were
in my
with
mind.
the New York Ballet.
In my sleep. And I move very well. I still have like some port de bras, but no.
Yeah.
No, it was a big part of my childhood for sure. Sure, I can chat about that a little bit.
Yeah. I'm just curious about it. Yeah.
Well, it certainly informed my musicianship enormously. I don't read music in the sense that most people would define. But I was immersed in classical music from a very young age, almost every day of my life. So by the time I became quite serious about ballet, maybe 10, 11 years old, you know, I was hearing beautiful classical music and not knowing the names of the pieces. I wasn't getting music appreciation class to accompany what I was hearing. But I would go home and then I would sound out all these melodies on the piano. And true to my fabulous Jewish mother's form, she would say, honey, that's terrific, but you know that's not your song. That's Scarlatti, or like, that's Shostakovich. Like, she was constantly emphasizing to me which melodies thought I was making up were my own, and which I was sounding out by ear that I would have heard in ballet class. And the interesting thing to think about now is that, you know, some moms might have just been like, that's great, like you picked that up by ear. And it was very important to her that I develop some kind of individualistic voice. And I look back and I realize that's probably pretty unusual. Like, she was a true American in that sense. She wanted me to like not just play by ear, but compose my own music. And this is a woman like who cannot play a note or sing in tune. So it's amazing.
Yeah.
And I think again that comes from that sort of immigrant, you know, like, oh, I've got a little Irving Berlin on my hands. Like, let's cheer her on. And if she's going to do this for her life and already has a talent, like, let's do it right. You know,
amazing.
So,
like, what an insight for her to have. Yeah. That's so cool.
And then, you know, in terms of ballet as just an expressive medium and a discipline, of course, it gave me that ability to focus and to hyper-focus in some ways, even when things are uncomfortable or flat out painful. And I remember there was a shift that happened maybe when I was 9 or 10. I would come home crying, of course, as ballet kids do. Like, the teacher's mean to me, or she's making me do too many rond de jambes, or, you know, like, my knees hurt, or whatever. And I got some sympathy, but I also got the pep talk of, well, honey, you know, you already quit piano. we don't want to raise a quitter. Like, you can quit one thing. That was the thing. Let's just stick with this and see where it goes. It wasn't like, you have to do this at the highest level, but it was like, let's stick with it another year. And then that other year became 3 years. And then by the time I was a preteen, I loved it. Wow. And I'm so glad that that sort of work ethic was instilled in me, wherein I, at a young age, I couldn't really foresee how I would come to love it, how it would eventually like nurture my soul, and that I would end up at a place like School of American Ballet dancing with New York City Ballet and a whole bunch of dances. So it ended up really yielding a lot of not only musical inspiration, but also maybe that theatrical, dramatic, emotional side of performance. So even when I stopped dancing, by college, essentially, that all lingered, and I was like, oh, well, of course, if I do a performance at the college coffee house, I should put my hair up in a pretty do, and I should wear glitter, and I should maybe wear a tutu over my jeans and my combat boots. Like, let's have fun with this and make this expressive from top to bottom, and think about which songs I'm going to do in the beginning and the middle and the end, and create some kind of narrative, even if it's abstract,
Yeah, that's so beautiful because, the art of a performance, it's really can be really different than just the art of crafting a song. Like this is a public facing experience. So how are we making this like dynamic? And
but that's also what fascinates and challenges me about our folk community is because I kind of backed into it. I was like, performer from a very young age, even though I was kind of shy as a person. Yeah. But I always felt safe and comfortable in that mode. Whereas a lot of singer-songwriters and folk poets and, activist artists that we know, I think maybe they started with the writing and the self-expression, and it took a lot for them to then get in front of people and say, this is my voice, this is what I believe, these are my songs. I kind of came at it the other way, where I gradually came to understand why I love doing this so much. Yeah. It was sort of like, I know I love doing this from the get-go. And then, but okay, what kind of songs do I really want to write and sing, even though I could write like Billy Joel or, write like, Madonna or whatever. And then eventually I ended up at, Vocal Lines. Yeah. Hanging out with you. But sometimes I think like, well, what if I'd had like folky parents and had just like started going to these things as a teenager, who would I have been? But maybe the same person.
No, I think that's so cool. Do you ever coach people on like performance stuff? Do you ever work with people to help them with that aspect?
I have actually. Sometimes I've been recruited to do that in a conference setting. I think I did do it once at Vocal Lines years ago, and I've done it at some creativity workshops in England with kids of a variety of ages, and it's really fun and gratifying. And I don't think it's that dissimilar from, also being asked maybe to teach for a day at like Dar Williams' songwriting retreat, because I'm always going to be looking for that positive angle. The same way you would sandwich any critique in an email, right? Right. With the compliment sandwich, like they say, where you might see potential and where you want someone to get in a short amount of time, in an hour or whatever. Yeah. But finding that thing that lights them up and then having them sort of magnify that, so you just get more of what they're confident in. I think that's really crucial. I'm not as good at like the really fine, discerning critique. It's like, I'd probably be bad on The Voice or whatever. Oh. I'd just be like, that was so emotional, especially at the end when you did this. Just do that more. more pink.
Still, that's beautiful. I mean, that's just like, I think that's beautiful. So, I don't know. There's a lot of different things.
Yes, my dear.
Okay. 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 Here's another quote that I picked up somewhere from something that you had sent me. As an artist, one of my main goals is always going to be to uplift and to remind us that every person is a universe with their own unique story and potential to make the world a better place. I'm wondering how your experience with cancer, like, did that deepen your commitment to who you are and what you can do in the world? Like, would you be willing to talk about that?
Sure. Well, first of all, I mean, I would have to be a robot not to concede that receiving that kind of diagnosis just sucks. It's just the worst. And you experience this kind of primal molecular overwhelm that's equal parts, at least for me, paralyzing and enervating. You're like suddenly the CEO of your own health, whereas maybe you'd neglected your health for years, or not gone to, in my case, hadn't gone to a primary care doctor in several years, or a gynecologist in a couple of years. Like I'd been pretty remiss. I don't beat myself up about it, but I like to point it out so that I can encourage, our friends to not do that.
Yeah.
But I also think I instinctively just, maybe it's being a label boss, but the level of research and focus and just taking the reins and wanting to know every single possible thing about what I had, the different choices I had to make pretty quickly, it was intense. And I don't know if I've ever experienced that kind of focus in my brain before, because first of all, I do have ADD, I'm all over the place. Look, a squirrel, 7 paintings, paints on the floor, the piles in every corner of the room. But when I really need to, I had that ability. And there have been times when I've thought, my goodness, how fortunate, how blessed I am that I had the wherewithal to do that. I'm sure there are people who cannot do that at all. And I think it must be even more overwhelming. I also felt in a lot of ways, and you can probably relate to this, I didn't want to worry my parents or my family any more than I already was. There's something about like my nature that wants to just deal with things and take control and be self-sufficient. And I also don't like to be told what to do. It's another part of my personality. Yeah. So you've suddenly got all these voices that care about you, that love you, giving you like relentless advice and asking, this cousin and that uncle and this friend, and that's fine. I mean, that's love. And you need to take all that information and somehow turn it into a plan. But I don't know what the point was. The point, your question, you were like, how did that shape your ability to remind me the name?
Be you, like deep in your, be yourself, and your music
it all
and everything.
Comes around to that, like listening to that inner voice, whether it be your voice of just your gut or your spiritual center. I'll also confide that I was in a very toxic relationship when I received that diagnosis. And I probably would have lingered in it a lot longer if I was just fine, because that had been my nature up to that point, to sort of ignore those types of red flags and to, again, try to make it work. But because I only had a certain amount of energy and a certain amount of just wherewithal, that voice of just like exhaustion and needing to prioritize my health, my survival was deafening.
Yeah.
And I think in some ways I can look at that as a silver lining. It expedited my ability to say, this is wrong, this isn't working, I need to get out of the situation. And it wasn't easy, and it kind of compounded my whole cancer experience. It was a very, very tough time.
Wow.
But, there are things I learned that have stuck.
Yeah.
And so, I just empathize with like anyone going through any kind of dual situation like that, where someone else in their life might actually be worsening their ability to heal or compounding, their struggle. So
Yeah. Yeah. You're a strong woman, Rachel. Really.
I try.
Yeah.
I am now. I
Yeah.
haven't always, I've had my moments of strength, and then I've had a lot of moments of weakness too. And I think one of the things that also came out of that experience is it deepened my friendships, and it deepened my appreciation of my friends. Like, my friends are just so important to me. And, I have an orbit and a round table of several soulmates, and I just cherish them so much. And I know you know at least one of them. So,
what was I going to ask you?
and I think they're also good for your health.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Good friends, right?
Oh my goodness.
The
It's
best
just like
immune
everything.
boost we can give each other is to be that to someone else.
For real. Yeah, my sort of mental health improved immeasurably when I finally found like a group of women friends where I live in North Carolina now, and I hadn't,
Right.
Lots of reasons why, just, being a songwriter, working alone, then going
Yeah.
on tour, it can be hard to develop that community. But yeah,
Oh, sure.
it's so important to have solid, like, ride or
Yeah.
die friends.
I don't know that I quite realized how crucial it was before that. I wouldn't say I took my friends for granted, but I also just I was perfectly fine being the person that everybody expected to be gone so much that they didn't even bother, to call or to kind of check in on. And it worked both ways. I was like, oh, I'm only here a few days. Like I don't want anybody to know I'm here. I'm just going to kind of isolate and like get my work done and then go back out there. And I had like zero work-life balance before my cancer experience. And now I think I have a pretty good one. So that's a huge shift for me.
Yeah. Amazing. So in the spring, you released Another Side. Is it right? It came out in the spring.
That's
did I have it
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's an acoustic reimagining of your album, The Other Side. And I believe you're about to release a video for the song Albatross. And this podcast isn't going to air for a little bit, so it might be out by the time people hear and see this. But
Within the month, yes.
okay. That song is one of my favorite tracks on the album. And
wow.
is it all right if I read? I'm just reading your words to you today. Is it okay if I read?
I can listen to you talk all day, so it's all right.
Okay.
Give it a little style.
Okay.
No pressure.
Okay. This is the lyric from the chorus of the song Albatross. But what when the truth reveals we all know less than nothing? Less than nothing wreaks a havoc no one knows, and everything underneath the ground is ever quaking. What I wouldn't give to hold your living, breathing ghost. Yeah, I feel like this lyric is so honest because I feel like I'm being the most honest when I accept how little I know. But would you just talk a little bit about the video and that song and whatever you want to tell people about
Sure.
it?
Well, that is definitely the most sort of soul-searching, I think, reflective song on the record. So kudos to you for picking it out. Didn't go with a banger, as the kids say. Yeah, and honestly, it's a bit challenging for me to play live because I have to really kind of go through a lot while I'm singing it. It was written at the outset of lockdown, and I actually was in a budding, brand new relationship that became very challenging because it was long distance because of the pandemic. And I felt pretty newly recovered from my cancer. So when our society and America and all over the world, when we started not only going through the pandemic, but this socio-political upheaval and protests and racism and all these things on the news that were just kind of unceasing, as they should have been.
Yeah.
I felt a lot of inner turmoil, like, I want to show up. I want to go to New York. I want to be one of those people I'm seeing stand up for what I believe is right and wrong and participate. But I also knew that I was among the most vulnerable should I get COVID. My immune system sucks, you know. I know that's why I got cancer. It's not mysterious to me. I had 30 plus years of 4 to 5 hours sleep and ate too much sugar and I have bad genetics and all these things. But moreover, I went through chemo and radiation and surgery and all these things. So that is in the song. And in a way, you know, by the chorus and my understanding of, you know, of my lack of understanding, my need to listen and to be a witness and you know, do what I can do. I think that's my way of showing up. So
Yes.
it's kind of like all contained in the song, but there's no real resolution to it.
Yeah. I love everything you just said, because I think that so often when we think about social justice, it's like, oh, I'm either going to a march or I'm not helping. And it's like, there's so many things you can be doing. And I think that's a beautiful example, like putting yourself at risk of your health. That's not going to be great, you know,
Or like,
or sustainable.
Through that fear could be deemed stupid. I mean,
Yeah.
there have been times in my life when I have done that, and maybe that wasn't the best thing to, you know, to just kind of power through your own vulnerabilities isn't always the best course. But.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just beautiful that you know, were willing to leave some of the ideas in the song unresolved.
Well, some of the imagery of the ghost, etc., that was in fact spurred by me personally losing several people to COVID very early on. So yeah, it was really personal to almost all of us, but there seemed to be that, you know, that reluctant minority that just didn't want to acknowledge the reality of what was happening.
Yeah.
And that was also very, you know, upsetting to me at the time. I remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, well, but, you know, this happened and this person ended up in the hospital and a week later they were gone. Or, you know, and this happened 3 times to me and very important people, an aunt, a business partner, and a friend. So, you know, don't tell me I'm being too careful
Right.
about the terms, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't anticipate that premise becoming so divisive. So of course it had to end up partly in a song.
Yeah. In the video, do you want to give us like a little
Oh, yes.
clue?
So I did do a performance video that was shot at the Creek, and that is out now. And it's one of those faux live videos where I'm playing with my band, but it's really the track you're hearing. And that was really fun. That's just up in my home studio. I encourage folks to check that out. It was great. But the official video is coming in a few weeks, and I think the imagery really does reflect kind of the infinite variety of ways that we all adapted and survived during that time, and the beauty that, you know, we're able to kind of hone in on wherever we were, and, you know, whether it was New York City and graffiti, which now I look at and it looks like fine art to me, you know, some of that surviving graffiti of that time, whether it's a mural of George Floyd or just, you know, things that people needed to write down that they were feeling. And then, you know, imagery of people holding hands and pride, and juxtaposed with some dance as well that just kind of explores some of the imagery we just talked about. So yeah, I can't wait to share it. I think it's going to be, you know, just something quite different for me. So
I'm so excited to see it. I'm excited to see it. Yeah. Okay. We have a little bit more time.
And I should say,
Go.
directed by a wonderful first-time female director, Pearl Flanagan. So,
Fantastic.
look out for her work as well.
Amazing. Would you talk a little bit about, founding your label and running a label as a woman?
Sure.
And yeah.
Yes. It's all I've ever been, so it's all I ever know how to be. I have a couple of sort of permeating philosophies about being a woman running a record label. The first one is that, everything I have always done and necessarily do is an extension of my womanhood. How could it not be? It's who I am. It's what brought me to this moment, and whether it's some aspect of my ability to communicate or to nurture, or just how I am in the world, that's necessarily the case. But on the flip side, I also believe very strongly in being a leader and being the change that you have wanted to see. So I'd get asked a lot, like, what are the challenges of being a woman, female producer, like female running a record label? And I don't really focus too much on that. I just kind of put the blinders on and do what I do. And once in a while, I'll kind of look back with some, PTSD perhaps about some of the experiences I've been through that, toughened me up, whether it was, that the Me Too movement kind of bringing them back up for me. Even though I'd blocked them out, early on, being a teenager and having certain creepy manager, lawyer people just take advantage or try to, learning some lessons the hard way. There was that. But there were also so many incredible examples and mentors I had along the way, from even being a teenager and going to a panel like at the 92nd Street Y about production. And it would be like Tony Visconti on the panel talking about working with David Bowie, and then another gal who ran her own hip hop label. And I think her name was Deanna Schwartz. And, things like that, where I would see examples that were loosely related to what I might want to do. Or even at a much younger age, someone like Debbie Gibson,
Yeah.
And her music was quite different from even what I was doing at the time. But, wow, she could sing, she could dance, she could play, she could write, she produced.
Yeah.
I saw the possibilities, and I always tried to let that lead me rather than the obstacles. I guess I'm an optimist.
Yeah.
Had to pin me down.
That's awesome. Just sort of like the breadth and you have a lot of energy, it seems. It's
Until
really.
I don't. Then I'm really
and then
done.
It's just sleep.
Yeah. It's like an on and an off switch for sure.
I get
sometimes
it.
in the back of the van, like Meredith Tarr, my tour manager and bestie. She'd be like, Rachel, look out the window, pretty mountains and sheep, north of England, and I'd be like, oh yeah, right. I'm like dead to the world. And really needed that nap, but yeah.
You're like, just get me to the venue. I'll turn it back on when we get there. Yeah. It's amazing I think it's amazing to be like a lifelong performer and realize it's like, for me, it's like I can be feverish, I can be, exhausted, I can perform in almost any state.
Yeah.
I can't do much else.
You've probably performed like on no sleep. And we're brilliant. And your mind was really loose, and you had like your best shtick, your best bands, your best stories. And the next day you're like, oh, how did I do that? I was completely running on fumes.
I know. And then it's also like, can I bottle that and have that like looseness? Like,
can I have that when I'm trying to do my taxes? Like, it doesn't work that way. Yeah, I have great energy at the things that I want to do, or if there's an impending deadline that will kind of energize me. But college was tough for me. You know, I went under this premise that I was a quote unquote good student. I'd gotten good grades. I'd taken the tough classes, whatever, but my study habits were terrible. And I basically made it through by cramming and writing really long, complicated papers like the night before. And it was
goodness.
so stressful. And I would stay up all night, and I'd order Domino's twice and drink like 9 Cokes and 3 lattes. And I look back and I'm like, I can't believe I even graduated. Like,
yeah,
that's horrible. And that is not a way to retain like any knowledge. I don't remember like most of the books that I read in college.
Wow.
But I could learn all my lines for the lead in the play and have no trouble like, you know, playing the coffee house 3 times a week. And, you know, all that stuff was a breeze for me. But
this is why it's so important to find time to do what inspires you.
It's true.
If you can find the time, you'll find the energy. So,
well said.
Yeah, thank you. Before we close up, is there anything you would want to offer to people as like, just like a practice for cultivating joy, or like, you know, part of the idea with this podcast is for people who are listening who are doing activism work or they're doing creative work and they want to, I just think in both of those careers, for, I guess, I don't know, for lack of a better word, it's like burnout is a big thing. And so how do you, how do you sort of like tap into joy in a,
you have 2 simple ways? You asked. So you said encouraging, you know, and then not burning out. That's big. I mean, wellness is obviously like huge for me now. Well, I shouldn't say obviously. We're still getting to know each other, but I've described a version of me years before my cancer where I absolutely just ran myself into the ground. And I'll do that occasionally now, but rarely. I do listen to my body a lot more now. I am trying to exercise more. I eat super healthy. I don't have sugar. You know, I'm very short on sleep. I need to work on that. I talked about friendship and how important that is to energize me. I would say, you know, for me personally, the philosophy of no as a full sentence has been huge, because we all put a lot of pressure on ourselves, especially if we want to be perceived, as we do, of course, as the kind, compassionate, soulful people we are. You know, this is why we're part of this independent music community, why we love the arts. We're lifting each other up. We know we're among some of the more mindful individuals, but you truly are no good to anyone if, you know, you got to put that mask on, as they say, that's on the plane, you know, before you can help anybody else. Have to be careful how you use the word mask nowadays. But and I think I used to ignore that a lot. So even though I definitely love to have tea with my friend, and I love to meet this person and go to this book talk, you know, when I'm home, the balance, you know, that the letter B, it's like, I should just tattoo that like on my hand, because, you know, maybe I do the 1 tea this week and then I do the yoga twice, because that's going to help me feel like a person who's grounded and healthy. Or, you know, maybe I just, you know, don't do that big activity or that social event, and I stay home and I paint, because for me, that is my therapy and my meditation. So I don't know, you talked a lot about finding the things that give you joy. I think we all know what those are. We just don't always honor them as much as we could. I hope that helped.
That's beautiful.
Answer your question.
It did. It did. It is such a pleasure and an honor to talk with you. I'm a fan, and I'm just
I'm a fan of you, and I think we have a lot in common. I'm sure we'll continue to know each other better and better, and hopefully do some shows together. I think it would be super fun.
That would be amazing.
It happened here.
Y'all were here for the.
Thank you for inviting me for your podcast.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure.
Right.
When you are tempted to walk away from their reverie, you might hear them say, "Kid, we are here. There's no reason to fear. Won't you join us as often as you are able at the big table?"
Jess Klein's Big Table is produced by me, Jess Klein, and recorded on the traditional lands of the Lumbee, Chiraw, Catawba, Saponi, Occaneechi, Eno, and Shakori people. If you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you did, please subscribe, please like, and please share it with your people. You can find out more about my upcoming tour dates and musical releases at jessklein.com or on my Substack. Talk to you soon.